When you don't recognize it, you don't have a choice. As soon as you recognize it, you have a choice. And in the beginning, just start to notice it. Then when you feel like, yeah, I'm really recognizing it, then intentionally try to generate a different conversation.
I'm very excited for this very first edition of the Savvy podcast. And today I have Tom Scott here with me. Tom Scott is an award-winning CIO and COO, author, and dynamic speaker with over 4 decades of experience leading billion-dollar global brands across retail, apparel, and consumer industries. He is a master of the Human Operating System Framework and co-author of Going Beyond Business as Usual, Mastering the Human Operating System for Enhanced Leadership and Communication. Tom translates neuroscience and systems thinking into practical strategies that help organizations overcome unconscious resistance, transform culture, and unlock breakthrough performance. As a speaker, he equips leaders and teams to activate their brain's full potential for clarity, creativity, and intentional action. So, thank you, Tom, so much for being here. Welcome to the podcast. I'm very excited to have you here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here as well.
So I guess we'll go back to the very beginning, because the reason that I wanted to bring you onto the podcast was because we were in a webinar meeting together, and something that you said really stuck out to me as something that I find really interesting, which was that the brain is wired to keep us safe and secure, and basically fear, which I know we talked about, you don't like to use that word necessarily. So let's also dive into that. But fear generally tends to hold people back, and the brain is actually wired for that. And so that was kind of the reasoning that I wanted to bring you on, was to discuss how the brain works and how we can kind of overcome those fears in order to achieve our goals in life. And so I wanted to talk about that, but maybe also talk about your book, because that is a fairly new publication as well, published only last year. So did you want to start on your background and then get into the book, or did you want to start on the book and how the background contributed to that?
Well, maybe it makes sense to start with the background because that's what
Yeah.
led to the book. And so,
Yeah.
yes. Okay. So my early history, I was back in the 1980s. I was a relatively new manager in an IT department at Nordstrom. I had about 125 people working for me, and I wasn't that long out of school, and I felt a little overwhelmed, but I had from the very beginning a desire to find ways to have teams reach their full potential, because I noticed it seemed that doesn't happen that often from prior experience. But when it had, it was magical. It was great. So I had that desire, but didn't quite know how to go about it. I had some good principles. I read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits. Actually, I had Stephen Covey as a professor before his
Oh,
company
really?
came
I
out.
I
Yeah.
actually just bought that book, so I'm just starting it now.
Really, I mean, he's sold. I mean, he's dead now, but that book is, I think it's 40 million sales of that book, and he's recognized, I think, by Fortune as one of the top 10 most influential business leaders. So yeah, I've found great value in those principles. So I was applying those, and then I met a guy, and I'll say his name because it'll be easier to use it. Dick Hab, who was a chemical engineer. He was an executive in the oil industry, but he got to be known as a kind of a really effective turnaround executive.
Mhm.
And Intel hired him to come in and help them with a major issue they had. They're trying to close a 1-year gap they had with Motorola on their next generation chip. And he worked with other people to help do that. They actually succeeded. But he said, I was there and there were all these neuroscientists running around. A lot of them were the group leaders. And when I asked why, they said, well, we're trying to figure out how the brain works, want to understand it better so we can make chips go faster. which made sense. And so, but in the process of interacting with them, they learned so much about the brain and applied a lot of it to human dynamics, which is in part how they help close that 1 year gap. So Dick decided to launch a consulting business based on this, how to help teams and people reach their full potential by using practical neuroscience strategies. And that's basically how I would describe what I'm doing today, because when I heard about it, it really resonated with me. I like the science behind it. And so for 40 years now, I have been a practitioner of it, but I've also been kind of a student of it. I've been observing in the laboratory of a business environment a lot of, companies that you read off to see, does this really apply? Does this really explain, how people behave? And can you use these practical principles to help people reach their potential? And I've seen over and over again that it does. And so that's what I'm up to. And then Dick said he had, and by the way, has introduced this in a workshop setting. Companies like Intel, he's been back into Intel, Apple, Boeing, Microsoft, General Dynamics, Potato Farmer in Idaho, a wide range of companies, and has never had to market because it's all gone by word of mouth. That's how
Mm.
significant the work has been. And so he said people have been begging me actually for years to write a book. And I'm not a writer, and I'm not sure these principles can be conveyed in written form. He did it in a workshop setting. A lot of it was experiential learning. He said, but I think, he tired and had cancer, and he said, it's going to disappear if I don't do something. Would you like to co-author a book with me as probably the one who's the most effective practitioner of it? And I said, yeah. So we wrote the book. And then I had people familiar with it said, "Hey, would you come talk to my organization about this?" So I've talked to several groups of senior IT executives and the FBI. I was talking to the head of the FBI office here. He said, "Would you come in and share this with my whole group?" And person in the PhD program in the leadership university was enamored with. He said, "Will you come speak to all of our students and faculty?" So that's kind of how I got started in this, and now I've really decided that this is a good vehicle to share this with more people, is to do it in a speaking format. And then I may do workshops and et cetera, and that ties in with the book. People can hear it, and then also if they want, read some of it in the book.
Yeah, what I like about books is that it makes it very like it makes the information really accessible to people so that if you're not able to attend workshops, like experiential learning is always the best way to go about learning something, but yeah, the book makes things very accessible. So that was published. Is it available in stores or on Amazon or
Amazon. Yeah, it's available
Amazon?
on Amazon
Okay.
and easily found with the main title, "Going Beyond Business as Usual," and my name, Tom Scott.
Nice. Okay. Well, we'll make sure to link that in the description of the video so that people can see it and get it if they love.
Okay.
So,
Nice. Thank you.
yeah. So, I guess moving on from the history of that. So, like, when you are looking at these things or like how the brain works, and the phrase that really caught me, like that really intrigued me was like how the brain is really wired to keep us safe. And so let's go into details about that. Like, what does that mean, and what are the implications of that in our daily life?
Yeah, yeah, that's great. So, no, caveat to start with, I am not a neuroscience expert. I just was acquainted with these principles, again, that came out of Intel and have applied them for 40 years. So I understand it more and how they're applied. And I've read a lot on how the brain, right down to the specific anatomy and the chemistry of how the brain works. But I'm try to make it just as accessible as I can, to people who haven't done any studying or reading on neuroscience. So
Hmm.
here are some of the key principles. First off, from the point we're born and we start taking things in through our senses, sight, smell, taste, touch, hearing, our brain starts forming groups of neural structures. And then as we experience different things, it put those neural structures together and in something that we've named. This is not a academic name, but we named it just to have a memory frame. So, for example, if you're born in my era, nowadays stoves are different. They have these ceramic tops and they don't glow. But in my day, you had an electric coil that was hot. And so
Yeah.
anyone my age probably has a hot stove memory frame. And it probably got built something like this. You walked into the kitchen and you're a young child, ooh, red, interesting. And you want to touch it. If your mother's there, she says, don't touch that. And more likely than not, sometime we touched it anyway, and we felt the pain. We had our mother say, "I told you not to touch that." All those little experiences associated with touching a hot stove, our brain compiled into these interrelated neural structures, which we put a name to as a memory frame. So we all have, or most people have, a hot stove memory frame. We have memory frames for how to drive our car. So we don't have to get in our car every time, read the manual, say, okay, grab the key, put your key in the ignition, turn it clockwise. We have a memory frame for driving the car. So these memory frames are great. They help us survive, that live. It keeps us from walking in front of buses and not touching hot stoves. And most of the time, it's great to just, whatever the brain serves up based on what it took in for our senses, we go with it. And that's good. What that does, though, is, let me back up a little bit. So the brain is mostly making new memory frames until about the age of 14, and then it starts to shift. And your audience is probably, some of them familiar with the term neuroplasticity or brain plasticity, which
Mm.
means the brain can still create new neural structures, in our terminology, new memory frames as we get older. And, even if you Google this, it will say, but it really slows down as you get older. So it's really that period up to the age 14 where it's intense. After that, the brain starts doing like a rapid Google search against the memory frames it's already stored to decide how to respond to a different situation. Again, like the hot stove. And so every
Mhm.
time you come to a hot stove, it's going to pull up that memory frame, which is probably going to result in not touching the hot stove. And that one's a good example because 70% of our neurons are dedicated in some form to what, we're using the term survival. Neuroscientists may call it something different, but we think survival is a good term. And, the first obvious thing is our physical survival. Like, again, keeps us from walking in front of a bus. But it's also survival of other things, like our egos, like our point of view, like our self-esteem. And so those are the things that the brain is trying to protect us from those kind of things. And I can go into this. I'm actually very specific things that I'll go into. But first, I want to explain one other element, and that is the chemistry involved. Part of what the brain is trying to do is achieve and maintain a state of homeostasis. It means keeping things the same.
Mm.
Cell
Mhm.
chemistry. It wants our cell chemistry to be kept the same. And so the other purpose it has in what frames it selects when it's doing this rapid search is to keep us with what's comfortable, what's familiar, and what's predictable. And so we also include that under the umbrella term of survival. And so that actually explains a lot. And that's why the title of the book is Going Beyond Business as Usual, because business as usual is kind of just maintaining the status quo. The brain is basically in love with the status quo. And
Mhm.
to go beyond it really requires recognizing that when it happens, and I can go into that in a practical sense deeper, and then actually generating something to go beyond it. Covey's first principle is be proactive. This is his first of his 7 habits is be proactive. This is a flavor of be proactive. You're actually responsible for what you're doing in life. You actually create it as opposed to just letting these survival defaults run the show in certain circumstances. Most of the time, it's what you want, but in the times where you'd be better off not, like if you're trying to develop a new skill or launch a new career or something like that, the brain say, no, 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 you're fine. Don't, here's all the things that might go wrong with that in terms of you looking good or other things. Again, I in detail, stay where you are. You have to actually generate to go beyond it. And that whole concept of fear comes in there as well. But I'll pause there because that was a fair bit of neuroscience. Uh, was there anything there not clear to you, Samantha, that you think I could elaborate on? Or
Well, not to me, but I do a lot of studying on this stuff. So,
yeah,
yeah. So I guess like the idea, what I really like to talk about, because one thing that I am constantly looking for better definitions of. So, is going back to this concept of the ego, right, and keeping the ego
yeah.
safe. So, I'm curious to know like what or how do you define or like what is your definition of the ego and exactly what is it that we are trying to keep safe about the ego? Because my understanding of it is that everybody like it's healthy to have a certain amount of ego, but when you get like when the ego starts taking over, that's when things can kind of become unhealthy or not helpful to you anymore. So kind of what you were saying that it is helpful to have like certain survival instincts and to have those memory frames that you can rely on, but that only gets us to a certain point and then when we want to get beyond that. So let's talk about that for a second. The
Uh,
concept of the ego and trying to keep that in balance.
oh, that's perfect. I love that you asked that question because, frankly, ego isn't the best word for what we talk about. I just, it's the one that comes closest to describing a bundle. So let me talk about the bundle.
Okay.
And maybe the easiest way is to talk about it in the context of a business meeting. I mean, because again, our book was business centric, although it's applicable outside of business. In fact, we've had so many people who've been exposed to it say this made actually a bigger difference in my personal life than
And that's what
doing.
I wanted to talk about too, as how you can apply it into business and personal.
Yeah, so I'll start with business because one of the best places you can see this in effect is in a meeting. So if you're in a meeting and very frequently you can observe all of these things I'm going to talk about in a single meeting. But for example, someone knows a lot about the topic being discussed and they're not saying a word. They're not speaking up. So, I'm always looking these meetings what's occurring to people that's having them act the way they do, and I have this basis that it's probably one of these survival defaults. So, usually it's someone is one of a few things. They're not speaking because the survival center is wanting them to avoid looking bad.
Hmm.
There are other people there who are speaking all the time and saying how much they know and going on because they are likely being driven by a survival default to look good. So one of the main survival defaults is look good and avoid looking bad. Now, looking good is a good thing in a lot of cases, but when it has you become a know-it-all in a meeting to the point where you lose your credibility and people won't listen to you, then it's not serving you well. That's when, if
Hmm.
you start to notice it, you can generate beyond it and say, I'm going to speak differently. But it's a proactive effort. And actually, anytime you go beyond these survival defaults, which are all the survival neurons are mostly based in around the midbrain and the brain stem and the back part of the brain. To generate something uniquely, you're actually activating different brain structure in the frontal lobe. We put a name to it. Again, it's not a scientific name, but we call it the values, logic, and intention center.
Okay.
I'll put that on the side for the minute. So another thing, you'll see in a meeting is someone always arguing their point of view because one of the other survival defaults is to be right and avoid being wrong. You'll have another person who will argue against that person even if it's not that logical, because they could be, their brain might is likely or could be serving up a survival default we call dominate and avoid being dominated.
Mhm.
If someone's dominating a meeting, you can almost, if you have another strong person there, they're always going to do pushback, not because they're so married to what they're saying, they just don't want to be dominated by this person. They don't want other people to be dominated. That's a survival driven thing. So some of the that was right, wrong. There's win and avoid losing. If someone's in the meeting and it was their idea, they might fight to it to the death, no matter all the good points other people are bringing up, simply because they want to win and avoid losing. Here's two more that don't necessarily have a match set. Another sort of default way people listen, and this you see all the time in meetings, is you listen for find the flaw.
Mhm.
Someone brings up a new idea, everybody else's brain is going to it's looking to find the flaw. Oh, that won't work because we tried that in 1963 and it never worked then. It's not going to, and a lot of meetings, and which is, by the way, another thing that then shuts down the other people in the meeting because they don't want to speak up because they know everybody's going to jump on what they say and find the flaw and they're going to look at. These are the dynamics that run. Look, I've been in what now 10. I was in 10 different companies and saw this manifesting all the time in every company. There may be
Mhm.
companies, but anytime I talk to other people, they say, "Yeah, that's you just described our meetings." I think this is pervasive behavior and meetings. The final one I would bring up is assign negative intent. Now, this is a good one. This is like, hey, you're walking down the street and a bear crosses in front of you. The brain's saying, this bear might eat you. That's assigning negative intent to the bear. And that's probably a good one because he might, and you should run. But in meetings, people are saying, "Oh, he's saying what he's saying because he's trying to show me up or look better than me. He's just trying to look good with the boss so he can get ahead. And if I don't say something, I'm going to look bad." So all these things are interrelated. You sign negative intent, so you speak up to avoid looking bad or to look good. And again, when survival defaults are unchecked, they run the show.
Mhm.
Now, if I make a parallel to non-business, let's say you have someone on the podcast that, for example, wants to start a new career. Or maybe you can give me an example of someone you think might be in your audience, someone who wants to learn a new skill, learn to play an instrument or something. Do you have an example you can give me?
Yeah, like an example I think would be like someone like starting a new career or starting their own business.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
generally I think those are the like taking those leaps into your future of like this is what I want for my future, but I don't necessarily have the courage to take that leap of faith right now, you know?
Yeah. 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 Well, let me start at first with an analogy, because this is kind of is repetitive to what I just said, but it puts it in a visual form, and I'll jump off of that. So, if you picture, I'm holding up two fingers. The top one represents an intention, a desire, a goal. The bottom one represents current reality. And picture that there's a rubber band between my two fingers. The further your current reality is from your goal, the more tension there is in that rubber band,
Mm.
or you want to reduce the tension. And so we would call that tension, at least one or the dominant form of it, the survival defaults that we've just been talking about. The normal way, probably the predominant way people reduce that tension is to lower the goal, lower the expectation, where it's more again, the brain's focused on comfort,
Mhm.
familiar, predictable. Whereas if you really want to achieve your full potential, yeah, the option is to raise your current reality. And to do
Mhm.
that means dealing with that tension, those survival defaults, AKA those fears. And by the way, the reason I don't like the word fear, because fear to me has a connotation that there's something wrong you're bad, you're defective.
Mm.
There's sort of a victim element to it.
Yeah, I
And
see.
I just frame it as no, that's actually normal. That is exactly how the brain is designed. It's not because your ability or your attitude, it's your brain's just functioning the way that it should.
Mhm.
And and here's a thought just occurring to me. One way that might be empowering people is to say, okay, yeah, things are as they should be. Fear, what we're calling fear or whatever, is just my survival defaults. And it's a very easy fix, frankly. I mean, it may not be easy in execution, but it's also doesn't have to be hard in execution. But conceptually, it's very easy. You simply accept, I got it. That's my brain telling me, don't go into this new career because you might fail it and you might look bad.
Mhm.
Don't go into this new career because you may start, having to compete in business and you might lose.
Mhm.
Don't go into this business, because it may dominate your life, it may take over your life. You're going to have to work, too many hours and it's going to dominate you. Now, maybe that's a smart choice, but again, it could be if it's just not wanting a new thing to dominate you, maybe you have to say, yeah, but it will be worth it. So I'm going to do it anyway. So um, that to me is again, conceptually an easy solution. Now, doesn't mean that tension still isn't, you're going to have to deal with it because that thing's going to come up every day. I kind of look at it this way. It's like you've got you got a little guy on your shoulder here, which represents your survival thing. And they say, no, don't do it. Don't do it. Do it. And you basically, okay, yeah, thanks for sharing, buzz off. But he's going to show back up tomorrow or he's going to show back up in an hour. You just have to keep recognizing he's there and then you generate something else. The key is if you don't recognize these survival defaults, you have no choice.
Mhm.
They're going to run the show. And once you recognize it, then you have a choice. You can say, "Yep, I'm going with the survival defaults." Or, "Yeah, I do want to be comfortable. The payoff for starting a new business really isn't worth it to me. I'm happy. I'm happy
Mhm.
where I'm at." It's a nice thought. Maybe someday I'll do it, and maybe that is the best decision at the time. But the other one is, yeah, I really do want that. Here's the value I see in starting this new career. Here's the possibility that opens up. Here's the potential I'm going to generate beyond these survival defaults. When I see that my survival's saying, "Don't do it, you might look bad," and it's like, "Okay, thanks for sharing," and you just stay in action. You just keep generating. I'm going for this. I'm staying in action, which kind of introduces another principle that people we shared this with have found maybe the most valuable in all of this. But it's called at stake versus at risk. But I'll
Mm.
pause here before I go on to a new branch. What do you see, Sam? Is there anything you think would be valuable to expand on, or questions for clarity? Or again, I don't
Well,
know.
the things that really stood out to me were like instances in my own life when we were talking about ego, and instances in my own life where I have let my ego get the better of me, and in an effort to keep me safe, probably didn't end up helping me so well. So I'll give a personal example of this, and maybe you can give me some feedback on this. So a few years ago, I went back to school to get my MBA, and so I have a background in real estate, and so I was taking a bunch of real estate courses at this MBA program, and as you can imagine, the MBA program, the real estate side of things anyway, it was a very male dominated environment. And so, me coming in there as a woman, I kind of felt like I had to prove myself more. And so, my ego showed up in a way as, I'm kind of embarrassed to think about it now, but my ego showed up in a way that probably like I came off as probably more aggressive than I needed to be and more like I don't want to say that I'm not knowledgeable because obviously, like, I've been working in the industry for a long time, so I did have the knowledge, but I came off as like an authority but in an arrogant way. So I guess my ego brought out some arrogance in me because I was like, in hindsight, I recognized that I was really insecure in that environment because it was unfamiliar to me, right? And so your ego does things to kind of make you feel, I guess, more to make you feel more secure, if that makes sense, you know?
Yeah.
So that was something that stood out to me as a memory that came back when you were speaking about the ego, and then like assign negative intent. Kind of feel like maybe that was part of it in there. And then I also wanted to ask your opinion about, um, from a leadership perspective, because as you were going through, people who talk a lot in meetings, and I've heard it said that from a leadership perspective, if you're the one who is like the leader in the meeting, that you should actually speak last because because your words will have more impact and more influence on the thinking of people in the room, and so that you should keep your opinions to yourself as a leader so that you can get the ideas and opinions of other people in the room before you go out and say your own opinion. So those were like two things that I
Yeah, those are great. I'm loving that you put those up there for me to speak to. Which one do you want me to take on first?
Let's go with the first one, me and my
Okay.
insecurities.
Okay. So, I always look for from a principle basis, what can I give related to a specific example? So as you were speaking, well, here's the principle where I always go to kind of look at, well, let me back up. The principle is uh people's actions are correlated to what occurs to them. You want to shift behavior or people's actions, you shift the occurring. That's, like perception is reality. But, let's say three guys are walking down a sidewalk and there's a black thing across the sidewalk. It occurs to one person that it's a rope. So he steps on it. It occurs to another person that looks like a snake. So they turn and run. Completely different behavior. Same object. They just, behave differently. So a
Mhm,
really
mhm,
simple concept. Perception is reality. So always look, if you can look for people, what's occurring to them that had them behave the way they did. The best way, one of the ways to discover occurring, because you can't, if I ask you, Sam, what was your occurring at the time? And that's a different word, but what was your perception at the time? That's even hard. So the way to get to it is to go to what happened. And sometimes what happened is something that happened in the physical universe, what somebody said, what somebody did, or how they move their body. It's usually one of those three things. It's either somebody did move their body, they pulled a face, they said something, or they listened to something in a certain way. So in your case, the question I would ask you, and I think you already revealed it, but I would say when you started that class, oh, and by the way, what somebody said, one of the biggest sources is what they said to themselves. Is if I'm coaching someone else.
mhm,
So the thing I'm really curious about is what you said to yourself as you were anticipating going into this class. And I think you kind of said it. You said it in terms of, real estate, and this was a male dominated thing. So what I
mhm,
heard, and I'll tell you what I heard, what I inferred from what you said. You were saying to yourself, yeah, these are a bunch of hotshot males who are going to try to assign negative intent. They're going to try to show up the, the little old woman, the little old girl, let's say, that's maybe
yeah, yeah,
in the room, and they're going to be aggressive, and if you and they're going to dominate you, and they're also going to make you look bad.
mhm.
You have to do things, they're going to have you show up differently. Would that that's how what I inferred from what you said. Would that kind of capture what was occurring to you?
Yeah, and I would say that resonates, like it was like this feeling of having to prove myself,
Yeah.
because I mean, I guess this is a broad understanding of assigned negative intent, right? Like that they're automatically going to think less of me. And I guess, the history of that is, having worked in commercial real estate for 10 plus years at that time and, being constantly undermined as a woman in the industry and, talked down to people calling me like doll, and in like professional settings and have me like fetch water and coffee and whatever. And I'm kind of like, you know, so that was the history of it because you were
Yeah.
talking about like what did you call it? The memory frame, right? So that's
Yeah.
the memory frame behind it. And so then when I was in this situation, it was like, oh, I have to show these guys that I'm like blah, blah, blah. Right. So,
Yeah. No,
yeah.
it's like things are as they should be. With that history, you probably had a memory thing that big of male real estate guys, with that expectation. And so,
Mhm.
so what to do with that? If you, what if you had the chance now with sort of maybe what I would hope with awareness of what I'm talking about in a redo, you'd say, "Oh yeah, I got it. Based on my history, that's what I would expect is going to happen." And I don't know if that's going to happen with this class. These people, I mean, were the guys in your class the same kind of jerks as ones you
No, they were
Okay,
amazing,
there we
honestly.
go.
They were
So that
amazing. I love them.
So when I say you generate something else, it would be, you know what? I'm gonna withhold judgment. I'm not gonna let, survive the guy. I keep pointing to the little guy on my shoulder because it's kind
Yeah.
of an easy way to think about this. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, based on my history, but I'm gonna look for value. I'm gonna look for value in these people I'm looking at as opposed to operate to avoid being dominated, to look good in front of them, or to avoid looking bad, etc. And that's one thing you can do is to say, I'm gonna withhold judgment, make my own decision. And another way, because I talked about generating something else, you could generate a more empowering stand for yourself.
Mhm.
Like, hey, instead of avoiding what there is to lose, this is the at stake, at risk thing. I'm still going to leave it as a teaser and come back to after the other meeting thing. At stake, at risk. I'm going to avoid what there is to lose with these behaviors. Instead, I'm just going to go for what there is to gain. I am a powerful woman. You know, I don't like the term, whatever the pop culture terms are. The visualizations. They're good things. It's just the terms end up with different connotations. But I
Yeah.
like it. Generate empowering stand. I am smart. I am a great real estate agent.
Mhm.
I am, I am capable of doing well in this class. That's an example of generating something beyond the survival defaults. Oh,
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't know. Is that helpful?
It is really helpful, and I think, there is also something, really empowering about, like, speaking those things, like, again, like, the connotations or the different connotations, but I think there really is something to, like, just, like, not allowing that little guy on your shoulder to kind of
Yes.
grow and just be like, "Okay, like, I recognize that I have these fears or that I'm thinking these thoughts, but I'm going to choose
Yeah.
different thoughts," you know? And
Yeah.
like we had already used the car analogy, so I've heard another analogy of, like recognizing that you're the one in the driver's seat and, your
Yeah.
fears and insecurities are the ones in the back seat, kind of like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? And you're like, okay, like calm down. Like I hear
Yeah.
you, but I'm in the driver's
Yeah.
seat and I'm the one who's directing where we're going, kind of thing.
That's a great one. I like that. I'll probably use that. That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
And
So,
again, I'm gonna say, just again, I've already made the point, but I'll do it again. Another reason I don't like saying even fears or insecurities, again, because that actually invokes their survival center even more. It's like there's
mm,
something wrong. There's something wrong with you. You're defective because you have fear and you have insecurity.
Mhm.
Whereas in this framework that I talk about is, yeah, things are as they should be. This is what my brain is wired to offer up. It's wired to offer up what I'm calling fear. I mean, fear is just a term we put to a certain, and we look at it and say, Dick and I, as just a conversation what they're having in ourselves. We bring a lot of things back. We try and take things out of the descriptive paradigm, like fear, attitude, because fear to you maybe means something different to you. You don't cut people open and find fear. It's
Mhm.
just, oh, I feel a certain way or certain thing. I guess that's what people call fear. And maybe that's not what fear is to me. Fear is only when you suddenly have a fright or something. And same thing with attitude. What's an attitude? So we try to bring everything back to the concrete world, which gives you more power to deal with it. And so these things like fear and insecurity, we would simply describe as these are the conversations that you're having with yourselves.
Mm.
And that's parallel to this is what your brain is serving up. It's like, I mean, your brain is part of yourself. So it's a little weird to talk about your brain serves you this when it's not like this independent entity, so there's a little issue with this is what your brain says to you. Well, my brain is me. But so we just say the conversation you have with yourself. And so if you say my fear and insecurities, it's like, no, I'm having the conversation that I don't know that I can do this. I'm not feeling I not feeling totally confident to do this. That's the conversation I'm having as opposed to I am insecure. I have a fear.
Mhm.
It's like a descriptive labeling that doesn't give you power, but it takes away kind of the power to deal with it. So again, if I'm coaching someone, I always frame it in terms of what happened. And a lot of times that's just what's the conversation you're having with yourself. I
Mhm.
think if you and or your audience just chew on that, think about it. It may not resonate with you and it's not discard it, but that may give your audience some extra power in dealing with some of the things. Is just look at it like this is the conversation I'm having, and it's what my brain's offering. Things are as they
Mhm.
should,
Yeah.
not not bad, wrong, defective, weak, incapable. It's just I'm gonna shift the conversation I'm having with myself, which means I'm gonna
Mhm.
take what the brain's offering sometimes and generate a different thing. Your analogy, on the car is a good one that you can apply there.
Well, you know what I would like to talk about actually is maybe going back to the very um beginning or the origins of why the brain works this way, because from my understanding of it, like, we're wired this way because, like, way back in the day when we were more of a tribal species, that we were wired to want people to like us, and we were wired to want people to think well of us so that we wouldn't get kicked out of the tribe, because that basically meant that we would die, right? And so I like, do you have anything for, like, to expand on that, and like how that actually developed as an evolutionary safety mechanism?
Actually, no, I don't.
Ah, okay.
I have nothing, and this may seem rude, but I certainly don't mean it that way. And I don't care.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
hadn't to the point I haven't gone back to study it because even my favorite quote about history is it was from what was his name? They're famous U.S. historians, husband and wife. Anyway, they said most of history is guessing, the rest is bias,
That's true.
and they were famous historians. So no, I just like okay, this is what's so in the moment. That's
Yeah.
what we
Yeah.
deal with.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to come back to at risk at stake, but let's take the meetings part first. If you want, are we good? You think
Yes,
we're
yeah, let's go back to
yeah.
that. Let's go back to that. I forgot about that, but thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so leader in the meeting should be the last one to speak.
Yeah. I don't buy into that. I don't buy into a lot of sort of specific rules in meetings, but I have a different principle.
Okay.
In fact, we have a chapter in the book on generative meeting design and facilitation, which has been very powerful. So a lot of the key in meetings is one, when you understand that people are going to come with these survival defaults, you can design the meeting in a way to manage it. So, for example, if you know now look, in all my teams, I do things to ground my people in this notion, and so people in many people on my teams in meetings, they already start to notice that they're listening to find the flaw, for example, and they'll check themselves. But not always. I mean, even I default listening to find the flaw, and sometimes I don't notice it or catch it. Usually, I'll notice it and I'll say, "No, this is a good time." But in meeting design, for example, if you know there are going to be flaws, and in many cases, you need to have the conversation about what are the flaws. You sit at the meeting
Mhm.
and say, "Okay, Johnny has a new idea. Johnny's gonna present his idea, and we're gonna break the conversation into two parts. Part A is we're gonna look at what works with Johnny's idea. We're gonna listen for the value. We're gonna look for what possibilities it opens up. We're gonna look for what there is to gain, and then we'll put a bow on that conversation. And there'll be mainly a conversation for clarity. What do you mean by this, John? And then we're going to have the second conversation, which is find the flaw. This is everybody, including you, Johnny. You generate. Everybody's going to generate at least two possible flaws with this. And I use the word
Mhm.
possible. This is another thing to keep. a- And behind all this, one of the main intents in a meeting, both in design and facilitation, is to avoid triggering people's survival centers, either with what you say or what other people in the room say. So you can manage some of that with design the way I just described.
Mhm.
And I mean, another key element is have a real clear focus on what your intended result is. Because look, most meetings, even with an agenda, everyone says, "Oh, yeah, I want to have a good meeting, have an agenda." I say, "Yeah, an agenda is about that important in the big scheme of things. A purpose statement that says why we're having the meeting and not just what we're going to talk about, but we're having this meeting so we can have this better future." you know, a Christmas party. We're having this planning meeting so we can have people in the company all build deeper relationship. That's
Mhm.
the bigger objective. The main thing that I put this much weight on is intended result.
Mm.
By the end of the meeting, this is what we have accomplished, and you make it as concrete as you can. With Christmas meeting, plan Christmas party. I shortcut that. Let's just call it a Christmas party planning meeting. We're going to have this by the end of this meeting, we will have made a decision on what the theme is going to be. We have made a list of the people who are going to serve on the committee. We will have assigned chair people to each of the subcommittees. We will have made a decision on what kind of food we're going to have. We will have organized a group to procure the food, etc. You make your intended result because otherwise these survival defaults just have people in meetings talk about the, hey, yeah, we should have Christmas party would be good. Hey, remember back last year we had a great party and we did this? That would be fun. Yeah, had a new other company, their Christmas party was terrible and ours was really better. There's so much. This is why people hate meetings. The most common thing I hear from people is meetings. I hate, our meetings are so ineffective. I went on a call with like my colleague's CIO from Switzerland one day, and he said, "Tom, I just got to tell you, I literally walked out of the meeting. It is almost identical. The same meeting I've had literally 8 times. Everybody said the same thing. There was no action decided and no decisions made. I'm jumping out of my shoes." And
Yeah.
that's an extreme example, but there's so many meetings. So that leads to the facilitation part. And this is on the leader speaking last. When I'm in the meeting as the leader, what I'm looking for is, again, what's occurring to people that's having them say what they're saying, or not say anything at all, or whatever. And I say things in the meeting to address that. And I usually do that, and this is such a powerful tool, is with questions for clarity.
Mhm.
Because I think why someone said the leader, you should always speak last, is because, leaders have authority power and people will think, oh, when he says that, that's what he means. And so many leaders in meetings, if they speak early, they'll say things in terms of a directive or
Mhm.
even, yeah, I think we should have Mexican food. Okay, well, everybody wants to look good for the boss. Yeah, Mexican food. That's great.
Mhm.
Survival defaults. And so in that sense, the spirit of what you're saying, I think, is good. That if the leader is saying things that you can just expect people are gonna, follow along emperor's new clothes syndrome, then you definitely want to avoid that. But asking questions for clarity, get around that. Because they can say if people are okay, I'm not clear on what the majority wants in terms of food.
Mhm.
So let's set, and I do little straw polls all the time. All right, well, let's do this. I've heard three choices there because then we're not, and it's stuck. They're not moving forward because people are talking about, well, if we get Chinese, we should do this. If we, all right, let's go. Let's our intended result is decide the theme. Let's at least see where everybody stands. If you're on Chinese, raise your hand. If you're on Mexican, raise your hand. I like
Mhm.
0 to 5 polls a lot too.
Mhm.
Okay, this idea in terms of its, but I'm switching topics. If this idea Johnny just presented in terms of a potential, let's just take a quick read on what potential you see in it. 0 means nothing. You wouldn't touch it with the 10-foot pole. 5 means I'll, walk over coals to implement this thing. Where's
Mhm.
everybody? There's
Yeah.
that. So asking questions and questions for clarity. And so I'm speaking a lot in meetings because part of what I'm reacting to is, don't speak until the end. No, I think a good leader, they're really facilitating leaders, is speaking throughout, but
Mhm.
they're bringing clarity. They're saying things that minimize the quiet people's survival center so people will feel free and open to talk.
Yeah.
And if someone's doing find the flaw, like we didn't set it up that way, I'll say, okay, John, I've got a clear, you see a flaw in this. I'd really like to hear for just a second from some of the rest of you what you see the value is. And then we'll circle back to flaws. You can, do that kind of thing real time. So yeah, no, I think the meeting leader is accountable to get the intended results done. And the chief way to do that is to manage the conversations, facilitate.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're saying like the leader should be more like directing the conversation and keeping people on track, but not necessarily offering an opinion at the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Opinions, by the way, totally trigger people's survival center. You throw out
oh,
an opinion.
yeah.
Oh yeah, well, I don't know. I don't agree with that. I think this people again, the opinion is one thing. By the way, just this kind of an aside, there are words in any setting, not just meetings, will trigger a survival center.
Mhm.
Now there's why. Sam, why did you wear red lipstick today?
Because
Now, that
it
doesn't mean
brings
you
out
never
the
said
color of my
why.
eyes.
It means you never. But did you see how that probably triggered a kind of a defensive? And again, in meetings, once things start getting defensive, it just starts going sap. We have a hard time.
Mhm.
Another one is should or shouldn't. Sam, you really shouldn't wear red lipstick with blue. Oh, by the way, not serious. I don't have a clue what you wear with, and your red lipstick looks great. I just
Thank you.
drawing on something that's lied
Yeah, yeah,
in
no,
the
no
lobby.
worries. Yeah.
So yeah, that's why and should and even but. Well, I like your idea, but as soon as you say but, you invalidate everything that was said before. But will
That's
trigger people's
yeah, and that's what I've read a lot or I've heard a lot like when you're I mean, it comes up a lot if you're trying to communicate effectively with a spouse or a partner and you say something and then you say like I really love all these things that you do for me, but like,
yeah,
it really bothers me when you do this, that, and the other thing, and then that
yeah,
"but" kind of invalidates everything that you just said you love about the person, and so replacing that "but" with an "and" or, like,
yeah,
just creating 2 separate sentences, like, "I really love all these things that you do about me, and I feel like we need to work on these things," kind
that's
of.
perfect.
Yeah.
I was just going to say the same thing. You can replace and or but with and. in
Yeah.
most situations. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's really good. And what you're doing there is you're not triggering someone's survival center.
Mhm. Yeah, and I've also heard, like, not not accusing the person, like, saying, like, "Oh, James, this is a really stupid idea, like, why would you ever come up with that?" Or, like, "You did this and you did that," like, that's gonna trigger those survival instincts and, just get people on the defensive, and that's not really open to healthy communication in business or in personal life.
Exactly. So another way you can say that to not invoke again, we put the general term of survival center. It's not an actual center. It's just you need a name to call it. So
Yeah.
um, is Johnny? I hear your idea, and I'm confident you see things I don't see, and this is how it occurs to me. And another really clean way is using this conversation with this is how it occurs to me. It's just, yeah, yeah, I think you see things I don't, but it occurs to me. This is how it occurs to me that, if we go down this path, it opens up risk down this other path. It's, just how I see it. Another really clean way, it may seem a little awkward, but I use it all the time. You know, Johnny, when I heard you describe your idea, so no, this is what I was saying to myself. That just saying that, it's like, okay, well, that's what he's saying to himself. It's another way, okay, sees it differently. But here's the thing: we have this section in the book called independent reality versus dependent reality.
Mhm.
Independent reality is where you have people who think their reality is their reality. It is
Mhm.
the truth. They are right, and they're going to go to the grave being dead right. Dependent
Mhm.
reality is, yeah, your reality is based on whatever your life experiences are. Perception is reality.
Mhm.
I see it this way because of my life experiences. You see it differently because your life experiences, and there isn't one true reality. It's we all see things differently. There are
Mhm.
people who are strong independent reality, which even if you say this occurs differently to me, you're not going to move in. They're going to hold to their and fight their reality to the death. Those people are hard to work with, and I coach those people, and we have a conversation about independent reality, and they even when they get it, they sometimes can't move off of it. So that is such.
Yeah.
But the
Well,
but yeah.
oh, I was gonna say, like, it's about like you were talking about before that, like, mindset shift of like how you think of things. So instead of going back to the memory frame, then thinking about it like, okay, I choose to see my reality as this way. And then if you go into life thinking like, okay, people are generally nice and want to help me reach my goals versus everyone's an asshole and everyone's working against me and like you're that's what is going to come.
That's dead on. That's a
Yeah.
great. I think that's a just yeah, great observation.
There were two things. So number one, I put a star by this, at stake versus at risk. So that was
Yes.
one topic to talk about. Another
Yes.
topic I wanted to talk about was going back to my own issues of insecurity and that example in the MBA program. And so the one thing I recognize that is really hard to do is like catching yourself in the moment. And,
Yes.
like, so how do we train our brains or hijack our brains to catch ourselves in the moment and recognize? Because we're talking about the little guy in the back seat. So,
Yes.
how do we train ourselves not to fall into those old patterns, right? So, if we're talking about like moving out of those status quo patterns, and catch ourselves before we react, because I think that's something that is really hard to do in the moment,
Yes.
unless you make a conscious effort, is to not just automatically react defensively, but to react consciously. So, how do we hijack our brains for that?
Oh man, you have such great questions. That is such a great one. And so I'm going to jump into that one. We'll keep putting off at risk at state, which is fine because the teaser. So it is hard, and it's like building muscle. you just have to go to the gym, and it takes a while before you actually start to build muscle, and you have to look at it that way. This is gonna take some experimentation, a lot of mistakes, and by the way, you should love the mistakes. Most of our learning is in mistakes. There's a great one of the best
Mhm.
books I ever read is called The Fifth Discipline: The
Mhm.
Art and Practice of the Learning Organization. Peter Senge. It's grown into this big, pop culture thing now. And one of his assertions is, we school really kind of ruined us for learning. It was all about getting the answers right, getting the best grades,
I
and
have a lot to say on that
details.
topic.
What's that?
I said I have a lot of opinions on that topic.
Okay, good. Anyway, maybe they align with mine, maybe they don't. But it's like in the mistakes is where all the learning is, and that'll come
Mhm.
up again when I talk about at stake, at risk. So, um, yeah, putting that uh, to the side, you it's hard to catch yourself in the moment with what you're saying to yourself. I'm going to keep saying that. It's like looking for what are you saying to yourself. It's hard when you're in the heat of the moment and talking with, especially one other person, to
Mhm.
catch what you're saying to yourself. This is where meetings are a great laboratory.
Mm.
It's meetings where you don't have to respond or speak in the moment. You can just start noticing, what am I saying to myself about what Johnny's saying? And the more you just remind, and you could say, "Oh, I'm just zoned out in this meeting," or "This meeting's boring." You know what? I'm going to just start paying attention to what I'm saying to myself as a way to build that muscle, because it's going to help
Mhm.
me. And my experience wasn't doing this. It took a while and probably a long time before I was almost always knowing what I was saying to myself. And so this is mastery you build over a longer period. But you know, it's a it's a fairly steep curve in the beginning, and then it levels out over a lifetime. But you can get in a relatively short period where you're catching yourself a lot of the time, especially when you're not one on one and in maybe a heated or charged situation.
Mhm.
That's when it's harder, is when you're talking to somebody and they're being really defensive. It's hard to catch yourself. But that's how you start. You just start saying, "What am I saying to myself right now?"
Mhm.
People
Yeah.
could be doing that right now with what I'm saying and what you're saying. What am I saying to myself with what he's saying? By the way, you're everyone's survival center is trying to fit what I'm saying into existing memory frames, what
Mm.
you already know.
Yeah.
By the way, feeling tired, that's good, because it's possible, maybe likely, a lot of what I'm saying, your brain doesn't have a good memory frame for. It's burning a lot of glucose
Mhm.
trying to find it. That's why when you have a long conference or a meeting and you're listening to people, I think it's something like our brain burns 70, some big
It's a
percent.
lot. Your brain is like the biggest user of calories in the body.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so it makes you tired. And so again, this is like, even listening to me right now, everyone could do this. Just look and say, what am I saying to myself of what he's saying? Chances are it could be something like, "Oh yeah, all he's saying is this. That's just that." Or um assigning me negative intent. "Oh, this guy's just trying to sell his book." Or "Oh, I already know this." That's a looking good thing. And
Mm.
people will feel like, "I've never heard this. That means I must be not exposed to enough things, or I'm stupid." No, I already know this.
Mhm.
Those are all survival center. So even in a case like this, people start noticing what they're listening to. It's a very useful exercise.
Yeah.
You have to build the muscle. You just do it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that goes back to the topic of neuroplasticity, right? Like
Yeah.
training those neurons and those synapses to,
Yeah.
do these exercises regularly so that we build that muscle.
Yeah. Now, my view is on that, and again, this is my guy in a diner view. This isn't necessarily backed by science. It's just that I don't think we actually retrain those existing neural structures. They're always going to be there, and they're always going to be offered up. We just actually generate new ones. And maybe that's what you're
Mhm.
saying. We
Yeah,
create
yeah.
that in that situation, that one will, be easier for us to generate too.
But once we generate those new ones, I guess what I'm saying is like once we generate those new ones, if we don't continue to use them, they
Yes.
won't be
Yes.
strong, right?
Yeah, yes, I believe that.
Yeah.
That's
So,
right.
mhm.
Something else that occurred to me, I was gonna say on, what were we talking about just before the at on, noticing and going beyond. Oh, well, maybe it'll come back to me at some point.
Should we get into the at stake versus at risk?
Yes, at stake, at
We've been
risk.
teasing people.
I know, we teased them long enough.
Yeah.
Well, again, part of the survival center's function is to protect us, which means avoiding what there is to lose is one thing. And so, Dick coined this term at stake, at risk. It came from the gold rush days. His grandfather ran a general store in northern Montana in gold country, and
Mhm.
prospective miners would come. And a lot of time they ran out of money before they got there. So they'd go to his grandfather and say, look, I've run out of money, but I need a shovel, a bucket, a pan, food, etc. I don't have money, but can you stake me this equipment? That's where the term grub stake came from.
Ah, okay.
Merchants would give miners a grub stake. And so instead of paying for it, they'd say, and I'll take 5% of whatever gold you find, 10% or, whatever.
Mhm.
And, like his grandfather would have a pretty good idea based on what their claim was, what the potential was there. And so they usually not lose a lot, but they what they had at risk was they may have just given all this stuff away and never get a dime for it. So they could lose.
Mhm.
But what they had to gain was maybe, who knows, maybe they, make $10,000 worth of gold in those
Yeah.
days.
Yeah.
That's the going for what there is to gain. And so another way that is going for what there protecting what there is to lose versus going for what there is to gain. Another thing that's synonymous is looking good, avoiding looking
Mm.
bad versus doing good. So it's all the same survival based thing. And the default, the survival center is operating at risk. And based on my experience and this concept, teams by default operate at risk, operate protecting what there is to lose and how it manifests. We described how it manifests in meetings, but it's also, look, I was in the IT world. So one of the big manifestations there, I mean, we had 50 trouble tickets opened every day at the last company, things that went wrong. And
Mhm.
in fact, I was mentoring the CIO, next CIO to be a major, well, one of the big General Dynamics divisions. And she said her biggest problem is things she's over infrastructure. When things go wrong, everybody's looking to avoid blame and blaming everybody else. It's just a big blame you. And in the IT world, it's vendor A blame. Oh, that's not us. That's vendor B. Vendor B. That's not us. That's vendor A. And oh
Mhm.
no, this is your guys. Right? It's just avoiding looking bad, protecting what there is to lose, and it results in massive slowdowns and delay and not getting things fixed. And there's just so many manifestations of this on teams. So for me, when I talked about when I was at Nordstrom, how do you really build high performance teams? This is the thing that's made the biggest difference to me. And when I came into my last company and I spent 30, 60 days, 30, 45 days doing discovery. I came out with 6 things to do. I said, and when I presented this to my management team and then to the whole department town hall, and I got to number 6. I said, oh, this is the other thing. I always look when I come into a company at whether the team is operating at risk or at stake, and this is what that means. And my assessment is, as it usually is in most companies, this is a team operating pretty heavily at risk. And almost the minute I said it, it was like, Hallelujah, brother. He gets it. They realized it. The people realized it. They didn't like it. And I just started getting stories. And for the next 2 years, I just heard stories like, yeah, it used to be the boss 2 times ago. He'd stand at the door at 8 o'clock. And we don't really have you have to start in the end time, but he'd sit at 8 o'clock and point to his watch if you walked in a minute past 8 o'clock. And the next guy, he walked down the hall and run me up the flagpole. I just had a call from the vice president of marketing, and he said this, and I don't ever want to have a call from that again and turn around and walk away, having no idea what was actually what happened. And they pitted managers against each other where they were fighting. So they were in a pretty extreme kind of at-risk environment. And the results, if you listed all the things they got done, it was less than a page of things. So I had a conversation that said, this is what at stake looks like. This is my vision for what this department's going to be. We're going to, back to mistakes. We're going to love when things go wrong because there's all kinds of, we're not going to like it, but we're going to love the learning we're going to get from it. We're not looking for who's to blame. We're going to look at how to fix it first. We'll come back and do or what was the root cause analysis so we can prevent it happening. But it's not and it's like, we know things are going to go wrong. Things are as they should be. That was such a relief to people. And we instituted things like when things go wrong, somebody gets a little donkey on their desk and it's like, funny, but feel like I'm belaboring this a little bit too much, but this is such a powerful thing. I said it will be our user community was saying, you're doing too much. You got to slow down. We're going to have lists of what we accomplish that will be 3 to 5 times what we're doing now. And that it completely shifted. And by the way, it doesn't take long. It also doesn't take long to shift it back the other way. Because actually, after I left, it went quickly the other way. In fact, my team that most operated at stake, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 of the 5 left within, 3 months. Talk about wanting to. You want to keep people, create an at stake culture. If you want to have normal or bad turnover, keep your groups operating at risk. But anyway, at the end, within a couple of years, our lists were literally 5x of the results. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about in these business groups is what are the results you produce? Not everybody, focuses on that, but that's always my focus.
Well, and I think that's an interesting perspective to look at it, because a lot of the time I'm coming at this from corporations that I used to work in. And, a lot of corporations that I used to work in, like they would never invest the money to learn about these things, to build effective teams. And my observation would be is because the person at the top was very ego driven and very like fear driven, and so it was like he had to be the one to set the culture, and because he didn't want to look at his own ego, that it was never going to happen, and so I think that's a lot of the time what happens within corporations or within teams or whatever, that if the leader is operating at risk, if I'm yeah, if the leader is operating at risk and not willing to recognize that he's operating at risk, that's going to trickle down into the culture of the entire company or the entire team.
Absolutely. And the main manifestation is looking good or avoiding looking bad. In your case, it sounds like to avoid looking bad and also to dominate. Look, I know a company that decided to go a certain way with a project, and it's supposed to be $100 million project and take 3 years. Project's still going. About 2 years ago, last I had track of what they crossed the 750 million mark,
Oh my goodness.
and it will almost undoubtedly be over $1 billion. And the time frame will be 3x what it was supposed to be. And the scope of what gets delivered is even in that time frame is they had the term MVP, minimum viable product. So people are going to lose
Yeah.
all this capability. And my assessment from the back of the bleachers. I mean, I don't know what's actually going on, what these senior leaders who do this are saying to themselves, but I think it
Mhm.
the same thing. They did not want to look bad for having made
Yeah,
this
and
decision,
I
and
think
we're going to stick with it when they look so bad.
I guess my question to you, in regard to that would be like, how do you know when to cut your losses versus like they're trying to save face in that situation, right? So,
Yeah, yeah.
mhm. But it's just
Yeah, it's
worse.
a tough one. This is also in a company who had a major theme of fail fast.
Oh,
You're gonna
yeah.
fail, do it quickly, and then cut it off early. And so
Yeah.
it more irony that this one completely defied what was kind of stated as a, and then maybe it was just different leaders who had left the company stated that as an objective, and
Yeah. Yeah.
the new
So
leaders didn't totally own it. But yeah. Well, I just remembered the thing I was going to say earlier
okay, what's that?
on how do you develop the ability to really start noticing your own listening?
Yes.
What do you do with it? Another great way is to have a coach or just someone to talk to who's at least a little bit grounded in this and say, "Hey," I keep using Johnny, "Hey, Johnny," or "Hey, Tom,"
Poor Johnny.
or Johnny, I have this issue, and this is what I'm saying to myself about it. You have to explain it to somebody else,
Mhm.
you know, and or if I was coach, you say, "Okay, when that just like I did with when you were going to school, can you?" And I figured it's long enough ago, you maybe couldn't remember, but I think you'd already said what you were saying to yourself, just not using that language. You talked about all that, so I was able to infer it correctly. But it could be when you talk about it with someone else, and they can have you think, "All right, then what did you say?" And then what did that person say? I mean, going to what happened is such a powerful tool. What you
Mhm.
said to yourself, what you say to other people, what they said back, what you said to yourself about that. It gets you down to the atomic level because that's where usually the mischief is. And most of the time, we end up dealing with all the symptoms out here. Well, she's mad at so and so, or we have bad morale, and
Mhm.
you attack symptoms and you do things that just aren't effective. When you deal with things at this atomic level, it gives you so much leverage and makes things so much more effective. That's one of the reasons I'm really excited to share this with people because this atomic level dealing
Mhm.
with things is powerful.
Yeah. Well, and I think to that point, like a coach who can help you walk through it, but also like for me, for example, I have a really good friend and I bring him everything that's troubling me or like issues that I'm having or whatever, but he's pretty good at calling me on my bullshit. So it's like when you have those people in your life who can call you on your like, hey, Sam, like you're not really being honest with yourself here, or, who can like offer you those different perspectives, I think that's also really valuable. But someone,
Yeah, that's great. And it makes me think like if I were coaching, I say, yeah, and what did you say to yourself? I say, okay, well, let's look at that one. When you said to yourself, real estate men are jerks and they're going to be jerks. Can we poke on that for a little bit?
yeah.
Or no, no, this is me. This is the
Oh,
this
oh,
is
okay,
me.
okay, okay.
This is a scenario. I'd say, is that so? Are all real estate? Have you met real estate men who aren't? If you look at who was it everybody or was it just Johnny? Johnny and his brother Jack? Was it just a couple and you're painting everyone with the same brush? That's where, you would poke on
Hmm.
what happened, poke on what you're saying to yourself. And that's how you could give well, no, it's not everybody. In fact, probably 90% are okay. Because, okay, so maybe when you're going to school, at least 90% are good and you can deal with the 10 that aren't, or maybe they're all going to be good. You just run into a couple of bad apple. That would be the
Hmm.
kind of conversation where getting down to this level of what happened, what you're saying to yourself can really be effective and make a difference.
Hmm.
In shift, yeah, people's actions are correlated to what their occurring is. You want to shift action and behavior, shift the occurring. That's how you could shift occurring by shifting, finding out what was someone saying to themselves at the moment it kind of shaped their future.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like starting
Yeah.
a new career, starting a new career. Well, I just decided it's too much. Okay, what were you saying to yourself at the time you made that decision? Well, I was saying to myself, I can't afford it. This costs too much money. Oh, okay. Can we poke on that? How much money is it going to cost? How much money do you have? Should it generate some possibilities for finding the money that you need to go to school? Is that the only hurdle? I mean, when you get down to what they're really saying, but a lot of times people won't say, yeah, I'm not going to do this because I don't have the money, because they will look bad. The survival saying, don't say you don't have money because people will think you're unsuccessful or poor. They say, yeah, I just decided I really don't want to do it that bad.
Mhm.
They or the objective instead of raising the current reality is usually so again, that's where getting to the what people say to themselves.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I really like this analogy of the elastic band because, another thing that I've learned and experienced myself was that you're really like you're not going to take that jump or that leap, until the pain that's associated with where you are now is more than the comfort level of, or like than the fear that I guess you have. Sorry. So the
Yeah.
pain has to be great of not being where you want to be, has to be greater than the fear that's holding you back in order to elevate you to those next levels.
And I would put a caveat on that, that yes, that is so when you're letting your survival center run the show.
Mhm.
When you see what's happening and you make a choice to generate beyond, you can have a huge pain level and generate beyond. You
Mhm.
don't have,
Mhm.
have to wait till you get to a more comfortable spot.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go for it.
Yeah.
You can
So,
operate at stake. I have some things in the book about from other people about playing to win versus playing to lose. There's all kinds of studies
yeah.
and
Yeah.
sports teams have figured that out and have psychologists to keep athletic teams going, you know, playing to win as opposed to avoid losing.
Yeah. Well, and I
Well,
would say, like, I've experienced this in my own life. Like, when I moved, like, I moved across the country to do this MBA program, right? And that was really precipitated by this feeling of just like I felt really, really stuck, I felt really stuck and like that discomfort that I was feeling of like, okay, like I'm stuck in this job that's not going to go anywhere. And it's like there was nothing beyond. And it was
yeah.
like, I didn't really have it. I mean, I never would have thought that I'd be like making a podcast, like 10 years ago, however many years ago that was now. But like I knew that I wanted to do something else. And so that was like, okay, like I stepped outside my comfort zone or like it was uncomfortable for me to move and go and pursue my MBA, but it was more uncomfortable for me to stay. And because
Yeah.
I already knew, like I already know my future if I stay here. But the future, if I go, there's so many more possibilities. And so that's what helped me to make that choice. We've been talking for quite a while now. It's been about an hour and a half. And so I guess my closing question to you, though, I guess, to kind of summarize all of this would be that, someone who wants to, like, what are the top steps or the top maybe two or three things that you would advise for people who want to, like, really learn how to recognize these systems that are in place that are our brain trying to keep us safe, and how if they really want to create change within their lives, within their teams, within their workplaces, what are the key elements in order to do that?
That's a perfect question for closing. Well, I kind of said this before, but it's basically you just start practicing. You just say, I'm going to experiment with it. I'm going to put myself in the laboratory, and you could do it
Mhm.
easily in low risk situations. Like I said, if you happen to be in a meeting, just start noticing how you're listening. If you can stop worrying about what you're going to say, that's why meetings where you don't have to say something. You don't have to respond to a person that just spoke to you is a good place. Or just in any gathering, even a social gathering, just say, hey, I'm going to take 10 minutes and just monitor what I'm saying to myself which again is kind of synonymous with what my brain is offering up.
Mhm.
And again, the more you just start noticing and look for the specific things that I mentioned. Am I listening to look good or avoid looking bad? Like, am I listening at a party to, oh, the way he's talking at me? Does he think my dress is ugly? They could be, is that what I'm saying to myself? In which case, that's not all that empowering, but the brain's trying to help make sure you look good.
Yeah.
Am I listening to look good, avoid looking bad? Am I listening to win and avoid losing? To be right and avoid being wrong? To dominate, avoid being dominated? There's one other that I think I didn't mention. Uh, am I looking to self justify and avoid being invalidated?
Oh, that's a good one.
Am I looking to justify why I have this opinion or why I wore this dress to the party and avoid being invalidated? It's close to looking good, avoid looking bad, but it's a flavor. Am I listening to find the flaw? And yes, you probably are. You're probably looking at someone else's dress and saying, "Oh, that dress doesn't really go with her shoes." Uh, and or are you listening to assign negative intent?
Mhm.
That guy is moving in on my wife. He's being nice to my wife because I think he's making a pass at, a sign negative. And so even at a party, even if you say, I'm going to take 10 minutes and do it, you can start slow, take baby steps, but start to do it more and more. And as you start to recognize it, again, when you don't recognize it, you don't have a choice. As soon as you
Mhm.
recognize it, you have a choice. And in the beginning, just start to notice it. Then when you feel like, yeah, I'm really recognizing it, then intentionally try to generate a different conversation. Yeah, that dress doesn't match your shoes. Oh, yeah, I'm finding the flaw. What I'm gonna look for what's good about that dress. That dress really has interesting patterns and colors. And that's not gonna go anywhere, but it starts to build the muscle of generating a different interpretation. Another I never got into other types of listening you can generate, but here are some. They're in my book. You could start listening for possibilities. I'm listening for
Mm.
find the flaw to Johnny's idea. Well, I think I did say this. What could possibly make that happen? The biggest one actually is clarity.
Mhm.
Just start listening for what you may or may not be clear about and start asking questions about. Because look, most of the time, well, here's another thing. We don't listen to what people say. We listen to what we say to ourselves about what people say.
Mm.
And what we say to ourselves is very much colored by our history and our experiences. And it's that independent, dependent reality thing. And somebody else, what they're saying to themselves about what someone says could be completely different. And so that's where, you know, when we talk about having clarity, two people see things differently. You try and get at least people seeing things in the same way. But you can generate more listening for clarity as opposed to find the flaw or assign negative intent. For listen for what's occurring to people. It's my favorite thing to do. Actually, is to be listening to what they're saying and looking at what's occurring to them that would have them say this. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's just to try and understand, and sometimes it's like, yeah, if I understand that I feel this is something that needs to be influenced, now I may know how to influence it. Maybe
Mhm.
it's something that's just there occurring. Or say something in the meeting that's just it from going down the drain. So yeah, shift to a different kind of listening. We have a whole section on speaking, uh, conversation wheel, 6 different conversations that you can have. And it's like picking the right conversation for the right circumstances. I'll give them to you real quick, which moves
Okay.
us into less of a summary, more of a new topic. But possibility, well, let's start with uh, completion, relationship, possibility, opportunity, action around the outside of the wheel, and right in the middle is clarity. And if then this is, if you kind of get the more listening part down, then you start looking at, all right, in this situation, what is the most effective conversation to have? We need innovation, new idea. We need to have a conversation for possibility, which doesn't happen unless managed well. Uh, I can see people are hearing what Johnny said differently. I'm going to initiate a conversation for clarity. Opportunity is like taking possibilities and identifying what's feasible and practical and the best way to go. Action is a conversation for who's going to do but by when and what are they specifically going to do. Completion sorry, is someone's incomplete with something.
Mhm.
I can see she's mad at what Johnny said. You could have a conversation like, "Hey, let's bring some completion to we left that one topic open, and I think people are a little upset about it. Let's have a conversation about that." It
Mhm.
could take all kinds of but, so that's the teaser for more, but no,
Glad to have you back. We can keep going.
yeah, I'd be happy to. But that's how basically you start.
Yeah, and you know what I think is interesting about what you said about speaking and listening is, um, I think a lot of people, because they're coming from that place of like ego and defensiveness, a lot of the time they're not actually listening to what the other person is saying. They're just listening to decide what they're going to say back, right?
Yeah,
And
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I think the listening wheel that you just explained is actually a really great way to think about that is like, okay, I'm like just learning how to like listen for different contexts or just like actively listening. We talk about active listening a lot, and not coming at it from a perspective of I have to respond.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't do this to sell my book. And all this is in fact laid out in the book. So if this really does
Mhm.
resonate with somebody, we have the picture of the speaking wheel, all the different kinds of listening.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think that the book is going to be full of valuable information that will dive further into this because obviously we can only cover so much in an hour and a half or 2 hours or whatever it is. So
Yeah.
yeah. So, well, thank you so much for being the very first person that I've interviewed for this podcast. It's been a lot of fun. So I hope you enjoyed it as well.
I did. It was an honor, and I did. And it maybe seem like I was placating you or whatever, but your questions were just really spot on. It was like where I
Good.
to go next. Like you just asked the question that would take where I would have gone next. So I
Perfect. Perfect. So,
yeah.
yeah, no, I really enjoyed this. So, thank you again. And hopefully, we'll have you back on here sometime soon.